He was the kind of man who could make a room lower its voice without saying a word. And on the Monday Lena Brooks walked into his office for the first time, she decided she would never be one of the people who trembled for him. Morning light poured across the 42nd floor of Vale Syndicate Holdings, turning the glass walls silver and the black marble floors into mirrors. Men in tailored suits crossed the corridor with clipped steps and lowered eyes. Women at the reception desk adjusted their posture when the private elevator chimed. Everyone in the building knew the rhythm of Roman Vale's arrival. No one missed it. At exactly 8:30, the elevator doors opened, and the air seemed to tighten. Roman stepped out in a charcoal coat with reins still glistening at the shoulders, his expression controlled, almost severe, his presence the kind that made polished steel look soft. He did not glance around to see who was watching. He already understood that everyone was. Lena, standing near the executive assistant desk with a legal pad pressed against her palm, watched him approach with a calm that was partly discipline and partly defiance. She had been hired 3 days earlier after an interview so efficient it felt more like a security clearance than a job offer. Harvard trained? No. Legacy connection? None. She had come from a nonprofit legal office downtown, where she had learned how men with expensive watches often hid cheap intentions. Her dark skin, quiet voice, and plain navy dress made half the floor assume she was temporary support. She let them assume. It saved time. Roman stopped in front of her, his pale gaze dropping once to the folder in her hand, then returning to her face. "You are late," he said. Lena checked the clock on the far wall. 8:27. "No, sir," she answered. The receptionist inhaled sharply. Someone at the printers looked up. Roman said nothing for a beat, and in that beat the office became so still she could hear the faint hum of hidden ventilation behind the walnut panels. Then he held out his hand. "My schedule." She gave him the tablet instead of the folder. "Updated for the weather delay on the Midtown route, rescheduled lunch, and moved your 6 o'clock call with Milan to encrypted conference room B because the line in your office was echoing." He took the tablet. His eyes narrowed, not in anger but in recognition of resistance shaped like competence. "You changed my evening call without permission." Lena met his gaze. "I corrected a security risk without wasting your time." The silence that followed was colder than the rain still clinging to his coat. Roman was a man obeyed by governors, investors, and men who built private armies out of loyalty and fear. Yet this new secretary had answered him as if authority was not something to kneel to but something to test. He should have dismissed her in that instant. Everyone around them expected it. Instead, he looked at the revised calendar, saw that every adjustment improved efficiency by the minute, and handed the tablet back. "My office. Now." The words could have been a threat or an invitation to war. Inside, his office looked less like a workspace and more like the command bridge of a private empire. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan under a low gray sky. A single shelf held old law books no one touched. A white orchid sat on a side table, too alive for the room, which was otherwise built from shadow, leather, and discipline. Roman closed the door behind her with a quiet click. "You should know something before we begin," he said, loosening one cuff with measured hands. "I do not tolerate improvisation, dishonesty, or attachment to office politics." Lena set the legal pad on his desk and lifted her chin. "Then we should work well together." That answer almost changed his face. Almost. He circled to the other side of the desk and opened the morning briefing she had prepared. His eyes moved quickly, taking in every notation, every highlighted risk, every corrected figure. For the first time that morning, he looked at her not as a staffing decision, but as an unknown variable. "Who told you to remove Miss Kessler from my Thursday dinner?" Lena did not hesitate. "She told me herself, when she said she would be there whether your calendar approved it or not." Roman went still. Vanessa Kessler was not staff. She was old money, polished cruelty, and the woman every business magazine had already decided would eventually wear Roman Vale's ring. Lena had met her only once in the lobby 10 minutes earlier. It had been enough. Roman placed both hands on the desk and studied his new secretary with a focus sharp enough to cut through pretense. "And you decided?" "That your time was not public property." Something flickered in his expression then, low and dangerous and impossible to name. Outside the glass walls, the office resumed breathing, but inside that room something had shifted by a fraction neither of them could ignore. Roman pressed the intercom. Cancel my first meeting. The assistant outside stammered. Sir, the board is already. Cancel it. He released the button and kept his eyes on Lena. Sit down, Miss Brooks. If you are going to interfere in my life, I want to know exactly who I hired. Roman had spent most of his adult life recognizing weakness before other men even recognized it in themselves. But what unsettled him about Lena Brooks was not weakness at all. It was restraint. She sat across from his desk with her hands folded over the legal pad, posture straight, expression unreadable, while the city moved in ghostly reflections across the windows behind her. He asked questions the way surgeons used blades, precise and without wasted motion. Where had she worked? Who recommended her? Why leave a stable position downtown for a corporation whose reputation made cautious people hesitate? Lena answered every question cleanly, never too fast, never too warmly. She told him she had handled crisis scheduling, confidential files, donor conflicts, and men who believed good manners were optional if they had enough money. She did not tell him about nights she had spent translating legal language for mothers who could not afford counsel, or the fact that she had accepted this position because Vail Syndicate paid enough to cover her younger brother's med school tuition in Chicago. Roman noticed what she left out more than what she offered. You edit yourself, he said. I prioritize, Lena replied. That should have irritated him. Instead, it sharpened his attention. Before he could continue, the office door opened without permission. Vanessa Kessler entered in winter white wool and diamonds subtle enough to be expensive on purpose. She carried herself like someone accustomed to doors opening and rules bending. Her smile was elegant until she saw Lena sitting in the chair opposite Roman's desk. Then it changed. Not visibly enough for most men. Enough for Lena. Roman, Vanessa said, crossing the room as though she belonged there. I was told my dinner was removed by a staff member. Roman did not stand. Then you were told correctly. Vanessa's gaze slid toward Lena, cool and assessing. I assumed there had been a misunderstanding. There was not, Lena said. Roman looked at her. Vanessa did too. It was a dangerous thing, that answer, not because it was loud, but because it refused to shrink. Vanessa set her handbag down with deliberate grace. And who exactly are you? The question landed with silk and poison. Lena rose from the chair, not hurriedly, not defensively. The person managing his calendar. Vanessa's smile thinned. That is ambitious for day one. Efficiency usually is. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Roman should have ended it there. He should have reminded both women that his office was not a stage for private rivalry. But he remained still, watching with the same controlled intensity he gave negotiations worth millions. Vanessa turned back to him. Surely you are not letting a new hire dictate who has access to you. Roman's answer came low and absolute. I let no one dictate anything. Miss Brooks made a decision. I am keeping it. Vanessa absorbed that with remarkable polish, though a pulse moved once at her throat. She stepped closer to Roman's desk and lowered her voice just enough to become intimate. Thursday matters. The Harringtons are expecting us together. Roman's expression did not change. Then the Harringtons will learn disappointment. For the first time, Vanessa looked less offended than threatened. Lena saw it clearly. This was not about one dinner. It was about visibility, leverage, the public architecture around a man like Roman Vail. Vanessa had built part of that architecture and did not appreciate seeing a stranger move one stone. She picked up her handbag and offered Roman a smile that did not reach her eyes. I hope your new assistant understands the difference between administration and intrusion. Lena answered before Roman could. I do. Vanessa paused at the door, her stare resting on Lena one beat too long. Good. Then she should also understand consequences. When the door shut behind her, the quiet inside the office changed shape. It was no longer about first impressions. It was about territory. Roman leaned back in his chair, one hand resting near the untouched espresso on his desk. You could have stayed silent. Lena met his gaze. So could she. A faint sound escaped him then, not quite a laugh. More like surprise forced into a smaller shape. He had not expected backbone wrapped in that much discipline. You realize most people try to survive their first week here. Lena lifted her pad. I prefer to do my job. He studied her for a long moment, then reached into a drawer and removed a slim black access card, setting it on the desk between them. This opens the executive archive, my private conference suite, and the elevator to the residence level. Lena did not touch it. That is a lot of trust for a Monday morning. No, Roman said, his eyes steady on hers. It is a test. She finally took the card, cool metal pressing into her palm like a challenge. At that exact moment, her work phone lit up with an internal message from an unknown extension. One line. No signature. Be careful which war you walk into. Lena read it once and set the phone screen down. Roman noticed the shift in her face. Problem. She slipped the access card into her notebook and stood. Not yet. Roman's gaze darkened with interest rather than comfort. Good answer. She turned for the door, but his voice stopped her one step later. Miss Brooks. She looked back. Do not let Vanessa intimidate you. Lena's expression remained calm, but something in it hardened into pride. I do not intimidate easily, Mr. Vale. I know, he said. And that was exactly why, when she left his office, half the executive floor felt suddenly too small for both of them. By noon, the building had learned her name the way expensive buildings always learned anything dangerous, through lowered voices, sideways glances, and information traded like currency near polished coffee machines. Lena felt at the moment the elevator doors opened onto the executive dining level. Conversations softened. A pair of analysts near the windows stopped mid-sentence. Two women from investor relations looked at her access card, then at each other. Nothing overt. Nothing accidental. She crossed the room anyway, carrying Roman's revised briefing and a folder of contracts needing signature before 1 o'clock. The private dining lounge was all smoked glass, brass edges, and city light washed pale by cloud cover. Roman sat at the far end of a table set for 4, though he was alone except for a silver carafe of coffee and a man in his 60s standing near the windows with the posture of someone who had seen too much to be impressed by wealth. He wore a navy suit that had outlived trends and a face lined by old patience. Roman looked up when Lena approached, but the older man looked at her with something sharper. Recognition. It flashed so quickly she almost doubted it. You are late by 30 seconds, Roman said, checking the watch at his wrist. Lena set the folder beside his cup. Then your watch is dramatic. The older man laughed once before he could stop himself. Roman's eyes shifted toward him. Good to know someone still finds me entertaining. Not entertaining, the man said. Outnumbered. Roman gave Lena a look that carried warning and interest in equal measure. Miss Brooks, this is Gabriel Cross. He handles matters that do not belong in writing. Lena offered a polite nod. Gabriel returned it, still studying her as if fitting her to a memory he had not expected to see alive in this building. Roman opened the contract folder and began signing with quick, elegant precision. You have the Harrington Logistics? Moved to Friday and stripped of Vanessa's additions. Roman signed another page. You did that on your own. You kept my first decision. I assumed consistency. Gabriel turned toward the windows to hide another almost smile. Roman noticed. He noticed everything. Miss Brooks, he said, placing the pen down, sit. It was not a request. Lena sat 2 chairs away, careful, composed. Roman took a sip of coffee and watched her over the rim of the cup. Tell me what you think the Harrington dinner really is. It was not a scheduling question. It was a door disguised as one. Lena answered after a beat. A loyalty display. Half business, half theater. The guest list matters less than who is seen leaving with you. Gabriel slowly faced the table again. Roman's expression did not move, but the room did. Not physically, strategically. She had stepped into a conversation beyond clerical reach and done it without guessing wildly. And Vanessa? Roman asked. Wants to remain part of the picture, Lena said. Maybe because she values you. Maybe because she values what standing beside you says to everyone else. Roman looked at Gabriel. You hear that? Gabriel folded his hands. I hear someone with ears. Then he addressed Lena directly. Who trained you to read rooms like this? Lena held his gaze. People who could not afford to misread them. That answer landed differently than the others. It made Gabriel's expression soften with private understanding, and it made Roman go quiet in a way that was more attentive than cold. Before anyone spoke again, a woman from dining staff approached with menus and a stiffness that suggested she had already heard enough rumors for one afternoon. She set one menu in front of Roman, one in front of Gabriel, then hesitated before Lena. Staff meals are served downstairs, she said gently, but not kindly. The insult was dressed in professionalism, which made it smaller and somehow sharper. Lena began to rise at once, unwilling to create spectacle. Roman's hand came down over the menu before she could move away. not touching her, stopping the moment. She is eating here, he said. The server blinked. Of course, sir. I only meant, I know what you meant. His tone never lifted. It did not need to. The woman swallowed, placed the third menu in front of Lena, and retreated. The room around them went carefully silent, as though everyone nearby had suddenly become fascinated by silverware and skyline. Gabriel watched Roman, not Lena now, and what passed through his eyes looked almost like caution. Roman turned back to his coffee as if nothing unusual had happened. Order, he said. Lena should have thanked him. Most people would have. Gratitude would have made the correction easy, tidy, and finished. But Lena's pride was too intact for that kind of performance. I can eat downstairs if that makes your point cleaner. Roman lifted his gaze to hers, and for the first time there was a spark of something personal beneath the control, something warmer than approval and more dangerous than anger. My point, he said quietly, is that no one in my building decides your place except me. Gabriel set his glass down with a soft click. There it was. Not a confession. Not yet. But a boundary crossed in plain sight. Lena felt the words settle into her chest heavier than they should have. Because they were not only about lunch. They were about protection, possession, and a kind of attention she had promised herself never to invite from a man like Roman Vale. She picked up the menu to buy herself a second of distance, but before she could speak, her phone vibrated again. Another message from the same unknown extension. This one was shorter. Ask Gabriel about your father. Lena went still. Across the table, Gabriel Cross saw the color leave her face and understood, in one terrible instant, exactly whose daughter Roman Vale had just brought into his world. Crystal light trembled across the water glasses, turning the white linen into something almost surgical. The low hum of executive lunch conversation seemed to recede all at once, not because the room had grown quieter, but because one older man at Roman Vale's table had gone very still. Lena kept her phone face down beside her plate, though the message burned in her mind with a force far sharper than the polished silver around her. Ask Gabriel about your father. Gabriel Cross did not reach for his wine. He did not lift his menu. For one measured second, his eyes rested on Lena with a recognition so carefully controlled that anyone less observant would have missed it. Lena did not miss it. Neither did Roman. He leaned back in his chair, one hand loose against the armrest, his expression unreadable in the soft noon light pouring through the high windows. You both look like the room just changed shape, he said. The line landed lightly, but there was steel beneath it. Gabriel recovered first. Sometimes it does, he replied, voice smooth with age and practice. Then he turned to Lena. You were about to ask me something. It was not an invitation. It was a decision, and Lena understood that instantly. Vanessa had tried to push her out in public. Roman had pulled her closer in front of witnesses. Anonymous messages had steered her here with too much precision to be random. Whatever came next was not an accident. Lena folded her napkin once, buying herself exactly 2 seconds. I was going to ask whether you knew my father, she said. No tremor. No apology. Just the truth placed between crystal and polished wood. Roman's gaze shifted to Gabriel without moving the rest of him. The room beyond them continued in discreet luxury, silver clinking, waiters gliding, money speaking in lowered voices. But at their table, the air sharpened. Gabriel looked down at his untouched glass, then back at Lena. I knew a man with your last name, he said carefully, long before you came into this building. Roman's attention narrowed. He had spent the morning testing Lena's instincts, measuring how well she understood status, threat, theater. Now the test had turned without his permission, and he did not enjoy being the last man at his own table to understand the rules. That is not the same answer, he said. Gabriel gave him a brief glance. No, it is not. Lena felt the truth of that more than she liked. There was no shock in Gabriel now, only restraint. That was worse. Shock could be spontaneous. Restraint meant history. Did you know him? She asked again. Or do you know something about him? Gabriel exhaled through his nose, slow and quiet. Both, if we are being exact. The words hit with the weight of something locked too long. Roman's fingers tapped the armrest once and stopped. How exact are we being? Gabriel ignored the challenge. His eyes stayed on Lena. Your father worked around powerful men, he said. Not for them. Around them. He had a habit of noticing the details other people missed, which made him useful and dangerous in equal measure. Lena felt the phrase settle into her with a strange, unwelcome familiarity. It sounded too much like the person she had spent her life becoming without understanding why. "And you knew him personally?" she asked. "Yes." Gabriel did not soften it. "Enough to recognize his daughter the moment that message reached you." Roman's head turned fully now. It was the first time since lunch began that surprise touched his face without disguise. Small, cold, immediate. "You knew who she was before I did," he said. Gabriel met his gaze. "I suspected this morning. I became certain just now." Lena looked from one man to the other and understood something almost as important as the answer she had come for. Whatever her father had been, his name did not belong to ordinary office gossip. It moved in older channels, dangerous ones. "Then stop speaking around me," she said, more sharply than before. "If my father matters in this room, I deserve to know why." The edge in her voice did not offend Roman. If anything, it seemed to steady him. He leaned forward, forearms resting lightly on the table, all public ease gone now. "You do," he said. "And he does." Gabriel's jaw tightened by a fraction. He had spent years learning when to reveal information and when to bury it under time. But Lena had just done what neither Roman's authority nor Vanessa's aggression had managed all day. She forced the truth into the open. "Your father once protected a ledger that several people wanted erased," Gabriel said at last. "Not money. Names. Meetings. Favors that were never supposed to exist on paper." Lena's pulse kicked hard once. Anonymous warnings. Gabriel's reaction. Roman's sudden interest. The pieces did not fit yet, but they had edges now. "And that concerns me because—" Gabriel held her gaze. "Because if someone inside this company knows who you are, then those messages were not meant to scare you away." He paused, and even Roman did not interrupt. "They were meant to see whether you already knew what had been left to you." The faint scrape of a chair somewhere behind them sounded unnaturally loud, as if the whole lounge had leaned closer without turning its head. A waiter appeared with perfect timing to refill water glasses, then vanished again, leaving the three of them inside a silence too polished to be called awkward. Lena did not touch her drink. "What was left to me?" she repeated, keeping her eyes on Gabriel. "Is that a figure of speech? Or are we talking about something real?" Gabriel's expression gave nothing away cheaply. Men like him had spent decades surviving by deciding which truths could breathe and which had to remain buried. "Real," he said. Roman's gaze moved to Lena, then back to Gabriel. "Start at the beginning," he said, his voice quiet enough that it forced obedience rather than demanded it. "You invited me to lunch because you wanted me to see how she handles pressure. Congratulations. She handles it well. Now tell us what we are actually dealing with." Gabriel let the rebuke pass. He had known Roman long enough to hear the difference between anger and control. This was control strained thin. "Your father kept records in a way no one expected," he told Lena. "Not in his own name. Not in any place obvious." He understood that powerful men fear memory more than accusation. Accusations can be denied. Records cannot. Lena sat back a fraction, not from fear but from the force of recognition moving through her in pieces she could not yet name. Her father had died with very little explanation and too many unfinished silences. Growing up, she had learned to treat those silences as weather. Present, unavoidable, impossible to question. Now Gabriel was opening them one panel at a time. "If this was so important," she asked, "why am I hearing about it now?" Gabriel's answer came without delay. "Because no one was certain you could be found through him until you walked into Roman's office using your real name." Roman's eyes sharpened. "You are saying her name has been dormant in the wrong circles until now." "I am saying," Gabriel replied, "that the people who remember your father would have dismissed Lena Brooks as coincidence until they saw the way she thinks, the way she listens, and the timing of where she appeared." Lena absorbed that in stillness. Her being here was no longer just professional risk. It had become evidence. Vanessa's hostility, the warning messages, the sudden focus tightening around her position inside the company. None of it felt theatrical anymore. It felt calculated. Roman saw the shift in her face before she spoke. "You should leave the building tonight through the private garage," he said. The statement arrived so naturally that it sounded less like advice than habit. Lena turned to him immediately. "No." The answer was calm, but absolute. Gabriel looked between them, and for the first time since the message arrived, something almost like approval touched his expression. Roman's jaw moved once. "No." If someone is testing whether I know something, Lena said, then changing my routine the second I hear this tells them I am afraid and ignorant at the same time. I am not giving either answer. Roman held her gaze. There it was again, the quality in her he had noticed before anyone else admitted it out loud. Not recklessness. Calculation under pressure. She was not refusing him to be difficult. She was seeing the board. Then what do you suggest? He asked. It was a real question. That alone changed the balance at the table. Lena looked down at her phone, then set it carefully beside her plate. We answer without answering, she said. I stay visible. I leave when I was expected to leave. I do not ask anyone else about my father. And whoever sent the messages gets one more chance to show whether they are protecting me or using me. Roman watched her for a long second. Gabriel did too, but with older eyes. Eyes that had known the man who taught this woman to think in patient angles without ever living long enough to raise her into them. That is dangerous, Gabriel said. So is keeping me blind, Lena answered. The line landed harder than if she had raised her voice. Roman looked down briefly, thumb resting against the stem of his water glass, then back at Gabriel. What else are you not saying? Gabriel's silence this time was not refusal. It was measurement. Finally, he said, your father did not just keep a ledger. He arranged for access to it to depend on recognition. Not a password, not a keycard, a person. Lena felt something cold and immediate move through her. Me? Gabriel gave a single small nod. Roman went completely still. The room around them continued in expensive ease, but at that table the truth had just crossed a line it could not uncross. Lena was no longer adjacent to the problem. She was part of the mechanism. And for the first time since she entered Roman Vale's world, his protectiveness stopped looking like instinct and started looking like strategy colliding with something far more personal. Porcelain touched porcelain at a nearby table, a delicate sound that felt strangely brittle against the pressure gathering in the air. Beyond the tall windows, Manhattan gleamed in winter light, all glass and money and clean lines, while at Roman's table a dead man's decisions kept rearranging the living. Gabriel reached into the inner pocket of his jacket with deliberate calm and drew out a business card holder worn smooth at the edges. He opened it, not for a card, but for a folded scrap of paper tucked behind one. Age had yellowed it just enough to make it feel private. I kept this because I did not know whether it would ever matter, he said. Roman's eyes dropped to the paper and lifted again. You have had this all along? The disappointment in his voice was colder than anger. Gabriel accepted it without defense. I had a line, not an answer. He set the folded slip on the table but kept 2 fingers on it, as if releasing it too quickly might change the room again. Your father gave me this years ago, Lena. He said if anyone ever came asking the right question with his eyes in her face, I was to wait until she asked twice. Lena stared at the paper without touching it. I asked twice. You did. Gabriel removed his hand. The handwriting on the slip was compact and precise, faded but legible. 4 words. Westbridge. Archive level. Blue door. No address. No explanation. Just a location stripped to its bones. Roman read it in silence, then looked at Gabriel. Westbridge is one of our old storage properties in Queens. Mostly paper overflow before everything went digital. Gabriel gave a faint nod. Your father liked places that became invisible by seeming boring. Lena finally picked up the note. The paper felt dry and fragile in her hand, but the effect of it was immediate. This was no longer theory. It was not just some elegant story about dangerous men and vanished records. It was an actual place, one concrete instruction left behind by a father who had never explained enough while he was alive. Why did he trust you with this? She asked. Gabriel's face changed in the smallest way, a shadow of old regret moving beneath control. Because he believed I owed him honesty at least once in my life. Roman did not miss the weight of that sentence. And did you? Gabriel looked at Lena. Not then. That answer settled between them with a gravity no one tried to soften. Lena folded the note carefully, not out of sentiment, but to keep her hands steady. So now we have a door in Queens and no idea who wants me to find it first. Roman was already thinking 3 moves ahead. It showed in the stillness, in the way his attention narrowed and the charm he used in public disappeared completely. No, he said. Now we have a location, a leak inside my company, a rival who is watching every shift in proximity, and a woman whose name just became leverage if the wrong person moves faster than we do. Lena looked at him. You mean me? I do. The directness should have felt harsh. Instead, it felt clean. Gabriel leaned back slightly, as if allowing the next decision to belong where it now had to belong. That decision, however, did not come from Roman first. It came from Lena. Then I am going there, she said. Roman's head turned toward her at once. Not alone. I did not say alone. He held her gaze. The jealousy that had been simmering around Vanessa, around every person who treated Lena as movable, changed shape in that instant. It was no longer about social rivalry or wounded possession. It became something more dangerous and more honest. Roman could not stand the idea of Lena stepping toward a hidden piece of her life without him in the room. If this is tied to my company, then I decide security, he said. Lena did not flinch. If this is tied to my father, then I decide whether we go at all. The line struck cleanly, and for one charged second neither gave way. Gabriel watched the standoff with the weary clarity of a man who had seen power mistake itself for protection before. Roman broke the silence first, but not by overpowering her. Then we decide both, he said. It was a concession, and everyone at the table understood its rarity. Lena considered him, seeing not only the authority that made other people move, but the adjustment beneath it. He was not ordering her out of the truth. He was stepping into it beside her. Tonight, she said. Roman nodded once. Tonight. Gabriel reached for his water at last, though his hand looked older now than it had 10 minutes earlier. If someone inside the company sent those messages, movement will be noticed the moment either of you changes routine, he warned. Lena slipped the folded note into her bag. Then we do not change routine until the last possible minute. Roman's expression settled into something quiet and resolved. Lunch had begun as theater, a public arrangement of status and tension. It ended with a private pact no one in the room could read from a distance. By the time the check arrived, the balance between them had shifted again. Lena was no longer only the woman Roman had chosen to place at his table. She was the one person tied to a hidden past he could not control. And that was exactly why he was no longer willing to let anyone else reach her first. Rain had started by the time they left the tower. A fine silver veil over Manhattan that turned the sidewalks glossy and the traffic lights soft around the edges. The city looked polished from above, but at street level everything felt sharper, colder, more exposed. Lena stood beneath the awning for one breath longer than necessary, the folded note from her father warm against her palm inside her coat pocket. Roman did not rush her. That alone told her how serious this had become. His car door opened before either of them reached it, and the driver kept his eyes forward as if silence had been ordered in advance. Once inside, the noise of the city dulled to a low murmur against the glass. Roman sat across from her in the back seat rather than beside her, a detail that should have felt formal but did not. It felt controlled, as if he were giving her the room to choose whether this night belonged to caution or trust. For the first 10 blocks, neither of them spoke. The note was small, old, almost disappointingly plain. Blue door. Westbridge, Queens. No code. No instruction. No explanation. Yet both of them knew the danger was not in the words themselves, but in why her father had trusted so little to paper. Roman finally broke the silence with the same measured tone he used when the truth mattered more than comfort. If we go in and this is a dead end, we walk away. If it is not, you do not reach for anything until I understand the room. Lena turned to the rain-striped window, watching storefronts blur into one another. You still think this is your room to understand first? The answer came without heat, which made it land harder. I think if your father built this to open for you, then someone else has spent years waiting for the moment you got close enough to try. That stopped her, not because she disagreed, but because he had said your father instead of cross or ledger or asset. Something had shifted, not in the mission, in the way he was holding her place inside it. Queens looked different at night, less theatrical than Manhattan, more honest in its shadows. Westbridge rose from a quieter block of older buildings and newer ambition, a converted industrial property now divided into offices, storage suites, and discreet private workspaces rented under shell names. No neon, no grand signage, just dark brick, steel trim, and a narrow side entrance painted exactly the shade of blue from the note in her pocket. The sight of it sent a chill through her, so sudden she stopped walking. Roman noticed before she said anything. That is it. Lena nodded. He really meant a real door. Men like your father did not leave poetry when precision would do. The lock was older than the rest of the building hardware, almost intentionally out of place. Brass worn smooth at thumb level. No keypad. No card reader. Just a narrow key slot beneath a tarnished plate. Lena stared at it, then at the note again, as if a second message might appear under the street lamp. Nothing. Roman stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that his coat blocked the wind. How would he choose you for access if he left you no key? She did not answer right away. Her mind had already begun sorting backward through childhood fragments she had never thought to keep. Sunday, errands with her father. A blue building she once waited outside while he made a call. His habit of placing odd things in her hands to make her stop fidgeting. Pennies. Matchbooks. Tokens. Coins. Coins. Lena looked up fast. He used to give me old subway tokens when I was little. Not to spend. Just to hold. Roman's gaze sharpened. Do you still have one? In my apartment, maybe. In a memory box. The disappointment hit first, clean and immediate. Then Roman reached into the inside pocket of his coat and drew out something small, flat, and metallic, placing it on his palm between them. A subway token, old New York Transit Authority design, worn by years and skin. Lena stared at him. Why do you have that? Because Gabriel gave it to me after lunch and said if the note mentioned Westbridge, I would know when to show you. Her head turned slowly. He knew more than he said. He knew enough to keep talking in stages. Her first reaction was anger, but it dissolved almost instantly into something more fragile. Her father had not left her abandoned. He had left a trail only visible one step at a time, and the men around him had chosen not to betray it all at once. Roman held the token out, but did not insert it himself. This is your decision. Streetlight reflected off the brass plate, and the rain gathered along the edge of the blue paint in trembling lines. The whole city seemed to pause in that narrow service alley. Lena took the token. It fit her hand with impossible familiarity, as if memory had weight after all. She slid it into the slot. There was a brief resistance, then a soft internal click, followed by a low mechanical release somewhere deeper in the frame. Neither of them moved for a second. Then the door eased open an inch on its own. Not a trap. Not a trick. Recognition. Roman looked at the opening, then back at her, and for the first time that night his control gave way to something unguarded. Not fear. Not triumph. Respect. Your father did choose you. Lena stepped over the threshold first, and this time he let her. A current of stale, cool air slipped through the opening first, carrying paper dust, metal, and the faint, dry smell of a room sealed longer than it had any right to be. Beyond the blue door was not a vault in the dramatic sense, not gold bars and steel walls, but a narrow corridor lit by motion sensors that woke in stages, one pale rectangle at a time. Lena crossed the threshold with Roman a half-step behind her, and the door settled closed with a soft final sound that made the outside world feel instantly far away. The corridor ended in a small archive room lined with built-in shelves, old file cabinets, and document boxes marked in codes that meant nothing to her at first glance. It looked less like a criminal secret than a forgotten legal annex, and that was what made it unsettling. Real danger rarely announced itself in spectacle. It hid in records, signatures, and the memory of favors people prayed had vanished. Roman scanned the room in practiced silence. No one else. No obvious cameras. No recent disturbance. Yet the order of the place did not feel abandoned. It felt preserved. Lena moved toward the nearest table and stopped. At its center sat a single banker box set apart from the others, not locked, not hidden, as if the room had been waiting for only one person to arrive before it became honest. On the lid, in black ink faded to charcoal, was one word. Brooks. Her breath caught. Roman saw it at the same time and did not touch it. Open it. There was no theatrical hesitation now. Her hands were steady when she lifted the lid. Inside were folders, a key in a small envelope, and a cassette recorder no newer than the late 1990s. Beside it lay a note in the same slanted hand she had already recognized from lunch. If you found this, they forced time to move faster than I wanted. Lena sat down in the nearest chair without meaning to, as though the sentence had reached into her chest and pressed. Roman picked up the recorder, turned it over once, then found fresh batteries sealed beside it. Prepared. Deliberate. Her father had expected delay, age, and fear, and had still built for this moment to survive him. Lena took the recorder from Roman, inserted the batteries, and pressed play. Static murmured for 1 second. Then a man's voice emerged, older than memory, but not lost to it. Calm, tired, unmistakably hers. Lena, if you are hearing this, then you are already standing where I hoped you would never have to stand. The room changed. Not physically, but every shelf, every file, every year between then and now folded inward around that voice. He explained without dramatics, as if telling her a truth she deserved plainly. The ledger was not just a list of crimes. It was a record of obligations, bought loyalties, and people protected in exchange for silence. Names from business, politics, law, and the private networks between them. He had kept it hidden because destroying it would free dangerous men, but exposing it carelessly would crush people who had once cooperated only to survive. Then came the sentence that altered everything. I did not choose you because you are my daughter. I chose you because you are the only person I trusted to know the difference between revenge and justice. Lena lowered her head, one hand gripping the table edge. Roman remained standing, but his expression lost its strategic distance. The words had reached him too, not as family, as judgment. The recorder continued. Her father said he had divided access on purpose. The location in the note, the token for entry, and the key in the box for the ledger itself. No single person had been given the whole path at once. Not Gabriel. Not anyone else. Only Lena could complete it because only Lena could decide whether what lay inside should be used, buried, or bargained into safety. The room fell silent when the tape clicked off. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Roman looked at the envelope with the key. That changes the nature of every decision after tonight. Lena met his eyes. It changes the nature of every decision before tonight, too. She was right. He had come here planning to secure an asset before an enemy could claim it. Instead, he was standing beside a woman who had just been handed moral authority over something men like him usually fought to control. That truth did not soften him. It challenged him. Lena reached for the envelope, removed the key, and walked to the back wall where an older gray cabinet stood recessed between shelves. The label plate was blank. No flourish. No code. Just a keyhole waiting to be answered. Roman did not stop her. This time he did something harder. He stepped back. The key turned more smoothly than either of them expected, as if the lock had been waiting in patience rather than decay. Metal released with a quiet click, and Lena opened the gray cabinet doors to reveal not stacks of random paper, but a single leather ledger resting on the middle shelf beside one sealed file, and a slim envelope addressed in her father's hand. No flood of mystery followed. No alarms. No hidden compartment sliding from the wall. Just the hard simplicity of something kept important by restraint. Lena lifted the ledger first. It was heavier than it looked, its dark cover worn at the corners, its pages edged with years. Roman watched her carry it back to the table and set it down with both hands, almost like placing evidence before a judge neither of them could see. When she opened it, the first pages confirmed everything from the tape. Names, dates, transfers, promises, notations in careful handwriting that connected boardrooms to campaigns, investigations to quiet dismissals, debts to sudden promotions. It was not sensational in tone. That made it worse. This was not a fantasy of power. It was administration. Human compromise turned into architecture. Roman leaned in just enough to read without crowding her. Halfway down one page, his posture changed. Small. Immediate. Lena noticed and looked at the line that had caught him. It was one of his companies. Not his name directly, but a transaction years before her employment, marked as facilitated through a shell entity now dormant. He did not deny what he recognized. He did not pretend surprise where none belonged. I never saw this ledger, he said quietly, but I know what that company was used for. Lena closed the book halfway, not out of fear, but to force the room to narrow around the truth. Are you in this? It was the most dangerous question she had ever asked him, and both of them knew it. Roman held her gaze. In his world, there were elegant lies, strategic omissions, and polished half-confessions built to survive public light. He used none of them. Adjacent. Benefited by systems like this, yes. Directed by men older than me when I entered that world, also yes. If you are asking whether I came here tonight to secure this because my name is buried in it, the answer is no. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It was measurement. Lena opened the sealed file next. Inside were copies of correspondence, old legal waivers, and one photograph she did not expect to find. Her father, younger, standing beside Gabriel Cross outside what looked like a courthouse service entrance. On the back, a date from years ago and 3 words in her father's handwriting. He kept faith. Lena let out a breath she had not realized she had been holding. Gabriel had not merely known her father. He had stood with him. The history between them was no longer abstract. It had shape. Then she opened the final envelope. A single page. No speech this time. Just instruction. If Roman Vale is with you, and he stayed when the ledger could condemn him by association, hear him before you judge him. Men are not only the rooms they were trained in. For the first time since entering Westbridge, Roman seemed to lose language. He stared at the page, then at Lena, as if some dead man had reached across years to place him under a standard he had not agreed to but instantly understood. Her father had known his name. Not casually. Specifically. That altered the meaning of everything. Gabriel had not sent Roman by accident. Roman had not merely inserted himself into her father's trail. He had been tested by it. Lena read the line again, slower this time. Not because it absolved him, but because it refused the easy story. Jealousy, possession, control, protection, attraction. None of those had vanished. But beneath them was something else now. Something more difficult and more honest. Her father had anticipated that the man beside her might come from a compromised world and still be worth listening to if he chose not to run from truth. Roman finally spoke, voice lower than before. You can walk this out without me. Lena looked at the ledger, then at the photograph, then at the page that had turned a private tension into a deliberate reckoning. The decision before her was no longer simply whether to trust him. It was whether to define him by the machinery around him or by the choice he was making in this room. She closed the ledger, slid the sealed file beside it, and handed the page to Roman so he would have to feel its weight for himself. No, she said. I walk it out with the man who stayed. And in that quiet archive in Queens, under cold white lights and the long shadow of old bargains, the meaning of power shifted once more. Not toward innocence, not toward fantasy, toward a harder kind of loyalty, the kind that begins only after the truth has had every chance to send someone away and fails.